She once said, "If anything ever happens to me, speak up. Don't let me disappear in silence." Vanessa Guillén was never the kind of person to stay silent. She was the sunshine of Fort Hood, a young soldier, strong, full of dreams. But on a sweltering April morning in 2020, she walked out of the armory and never came back. No texts, no cameras, not even a goodbye. For weeks, the base carried on like nothing happened. Only her mother stood outside the gates, clutching a photo of her daughter, eyes red with tears, asking every soldier who passed, "Has anyone seen my Vanessa?" And then, 71 days later, the Leon River started to speak. Before her name appeared on thousands of protest signs, Vanessa Guillén was just a Texas girl with long black hair and eyes that didn't know how to give up. Born and raised in a Mexican-American family in Houston, Vanessa was never one to stay in the background. She loved running, baseball, and taking things apart just to see how they worked. Ever since she was a kid, she'd say, "One day, I'm going to wear the uniform and serve this country." And she did. At 20, Vanessa became a weapons specialist, stationed at Fort Hood, one of the largest military bases in the United States. Not everyone can handle that kind of environment, but Vanessa never backed down. She was tough, but never cold. Friendly, but not someone you could push around. Her fellow soldiers said Vanessa was the kind of person you'd trust with a weapon and a secret. She had a boyfriend, another soldier stationed nearby. They used to text each other awkward little jokes, call every night, and talk about simple dreams. Buy a house, open a small restaurant, take her mom on a trip to California. Outside the base, she was a big sister, a friend, the daughter who always gave her mom the best bite of food. Inside the base, she was a soldier, a source of pride, someone who never missed morning roll call. But it was also inside that same base where she started whispering to her mom, "Someone's watching me. I don't feel safe anymore. If anything happens to me, you have to speak out." At first, her mother didn't think too much of it. Who would? Fort Hood was supposed to be secure, a place of discipline, of honor, a place where people like Vanessa were supposed to be protected. But her whispers planted the seed that something was deeply wrong. Fort Hood, a name that sounds like steel and strength, an unshakable symbol of the U.S. military. But concrete walls don't talk, and uniforms don't tell the truth. To the outside world, Fort Hood was a badge of pride. To many young soldiers, it was the start of something noble. But for some, like Vanessa, it was also a place where silence could kill. Between 2015 and 2020, over 150 sexual assault cases were reported on that base, and that's just what got recorded. Many were too afraid to speak, some tried and got transferred, or worse, ignored. Vanessa never told the whole story. She only confided in her mother and sister. That someone in power, someone above her, would stare a little too long, would accidentally pass by her room at night, that she felt like she couldn't breathe whenever she had to pull a shift with him. She thought about filing a complaint, but didn't. Because, like many others said, the system wasn't built to protect the lower ranks. Outside the gates, Vanessa's family began to worry. Her mother, Gloria, would drive to the base and wait for hours, just hoping to catch a glimpse of her daughter. The Latino community in Houston started rallying, sharing whispers, posting flyers, putting her face everywhere. And then one day, the phone stopped ringing. No texts, no calls, no weekend visit like she had promised. When her mother went to Fort Hood again, the guards only said, "We're looking into it." Inside Vanessa's office, her phone was still unplugged, her lunch untouched, a stack of paperwork left mid-sentence. But Vanessa herself was gone. April 22nd, 2020. Wednesday. The Texas sky was still and windless. Vanessa arrived at the base early. Her shift began as usual, inside the armory. She texted her boyfriend at 10:03 a.m., just a simple message, "See you later." It was the last text she would ever send. By noon, someone noticed she hadn't returned to her barracks. A few texts were sent, no response. A call, no answer. Her fellow soldiers figured maybe she had stepped out or had been assigned something last minute. It wasn't until late afternoon, when her name was missing from roll call, that anyone filed a report. A cold, short note. Private Vanessa Guillén is not present at her post. The military police didn't launch a search right away. No red alert, no helicopters, no tracking teams. Her family said, if she were a white officer, this would have been different. But she was Vanessa, a 20-year-old Mexican-American private who spoke Spanish when she called home. In her workspace, her car keys, military ID, and wallet were all untouched. No signs of struggle, no shattered glass. Just an eerie silence that chilled to the bone. Her team said Vanessa would never just walk off. That's not who she was. But the base treated it like just another case of going AWOL. For the first 3 days, her mother printed flyers herself, made calls to the media on her own, stopped at every gate asking, "Who was the last person to see my daughter?" On the 4th day after Vanessa disappeared, a young soldier walked into the command office, looking uneasy. He said, "I heard something, but I'm not sure if I should say it." The name he gave, Aaron David Robinson, same unit as Vanessa, worked with her in the armory. That day, Robinson had acted strangely, obsessively washing his hands, changing uniforms mid-shift without reporting it. Security cameras on base showed nothing. No footage of Vanessa leaving. No one saw her walk out the gates. It was like she vanished into the concrete walls. Robinson was brought in for questioning. He denied everything, said he knew nothing. And then, just days later, he disappeared too. Vanished. Just like Vanessa. When the Army finally allowed searches around the base, locals had already formed their own search parties. They combed through woods, brush, riverbanks, and near the Leon River, they found the first clue, a burned piece of metal stained with dried blood. Local police got involved, late, but better than never. The FBI was brought in. Media pressure was mounting. In a wiretapped phone call, Robinson's girlfriend whispered, "They're going to find her. They're going to find the pieces." Vanessa's family began appearing everywhere. CNN, Univision, Facebook Live. Her sister sobbed. "She told me someone on base was threatening her. Now she's gone. What more proof do you need?" And Vanessa Guillén spread across the country. Thousands of women who had served began sharing their own stories, fears they'd never dared to name. Fort Hood, the fortress of steel, was starting to crack. When Aaron Robinson disappeared, the military stayed quiet. No public alert, no federal manhunt, just internal monitoring. But the FBI didn't wait. They tracked his phone records, GPS signals, bank cards, and followed a strange new name, Cecily Aguilar. She was 22, living in Killeen, just 10 minutes from Fort Hood. Robinson's girlfriend, not a soldier. No one paid her much attention, until the FBI found out she had been with him near the Leon River the night Vanessa disappeared. When interrogated, Cecily stayed silent for 45 minutes. Then, like a dam breaking, she began to talk. Robinson had killed Vanessa inside the armory, after an argument. She had planned to report him for harassment. He got angry, he got scared, and he snapped. He stuffed her body into a metal case and drove to Cecily's house. And for 3 straight nights, deep in the Texas woods, they dismembered her body piece by piece, burned it, buried it, and prayed no one would ever find it. Cecily said, "I didn't think he could actually do it until I saw the metal box, heavy, bloody, and so terrifyingly quiet." When her confession went public, the nation was stunned. Not just by the crime, but by how easily it could have been stopped. Vanessa had spoken, she had warned them, she had left signs, but the system didn't listen. No one did. With Cecily Aguilar's testimony out, Fort Hood could no longer stay silent. But instead of taking accountability, they held a cold, clinical press conference. No apology, no mention of the killer, no admission of systemic failure. Just a string of hollow phrases. Ongoing investigation. Commitment to transparency. Following protocol. Outside the gates, under the blazing 100-degree Texas sun, Vanessa's family stood holding her photo high. Her mother, Gloria, wept as she said, "I sent my daughter to protect this country. But who protected her?" An internal report was leaked, and it was horrifying. In the 5 years before Vanessa's death, over 30 soldiers at Fort Hood had died from violence, accidents, or suicide. The sexual harassment reporting system, SHARP, was described as ineffective, inhumane, and easily manipulated. Whistleblowers were often isolated, victims seen as burdens. And some, like Vanessa, were silenced forever. The outrage spread far and wide, not just within the Latino community. Black women, veterans, civil rights groups, they all raised their voices. "I am Vanessa Guillén" was no longer just a hashtag. It became a promise. No one gets to vanish in silence ever again. At a spontaneous memorial, A black veteran laid down a small brick etched with the words, "Silence kills." In the weeks that followed, more than 10 senior officials at Fort Hood were reassigned, removed, or forced to resign. A petition demanding military justice reform gained over 1 million signatures. And for the first time in years, the U.S. Congress started listening. Vanessa, though gone, had finally forced the system to speak. News spread fast. Cecily Aguilar had confessed everything: names, times, how it happened, and where he hid Vanessa. Police issued an arrest warrant for Aaron Robinson, now the prime suspect in a first-degree murder case. But when agents arrived at Fort Hood to take him into custody, he was gone. Some said he'd been let out to gather more evidence. Others claimed he slipped through gaps in the military's internal surveillance. The truth remains unclear. All we know is a killer was on the loose, carrying secrets only he knew. On the night of June 30th, near a gas station in Killeen, Texas, a police officer spotted a young man walking quickly, head down. Dark hoodie soaked in sweat, one hand holding a phone, the other buried deep in his pocket. When the officer called out to check his ID, the man pulled a gun. 3 seconds. A single shot cracked the silence. Aaron Robinson, 20 years old, dropped to the ground, dead on the spot. No note, no apology, no confession. Just a gun, a pair of mud-covered shoes, and a phone still holding photos near the Leon River. Police lit up the empty lot with floodlights. Spent shell casings lay just steps from the body. Sirens and radio static mixed with the Texas night breeze. A grim soundtrack to the end of a haunting pursuit. Across the street, the gas station turned off its lights. Bystanders stood frozen. No one said a word. Vanessa's family found out through a phone notification. No call from the army. No officer at the door. Just a cold push alert. Main suspect in Guillén case found dead. But for them, this wasn't closure. It was a hole that could never be filled. The only person who knew the full truth had taken it to his grave. The public reacted with fury. Some called Robinson's death cowardly, but others worried. Now who's going to be held accountable? Who will tell us what really happened inside that room? On July 1st, 2020, a forensic team, guided by Cecily Aguilar's confession, entered the dense woods near the Leon River, about 30 minutes from Fort Hood. No flags, no ceremony, just hazmat suits, gloves, and biodetectors. And then, beneath the damp earth, scattered among rotting branches and broken stones, they found human remains. Not a full body, but charred, dismembered parts, stuffed into black garbage bags and industrial-grade aluminum containers. Nearby, they found rubber gloves, a metal saw, and the faint smell of chemicals still lingering in the air. 3 days later, the official confirmation came. Through dental records, DNA, and strands of burnt hair, investigators announced it was Vanessa Guillén. The country held its breath. There was nothing left to deny. No more ongoing investigations. No more rumors. Vanessa, the girl who once said, "I don't feel safe anymore," had finally been found. But she was no longer herself. Her mother couldn't bring herself to step out of the car. Her sister whispered, "She used to play hide and seek at the park. Now she's buried here, in the woods, in the dirt, with no one to say goodbye." The Latino community marched in every major city, Houston, Dallas, LA. Veterans placed her photo beside the folded flag she never got to receive, and walls were painted with one message. She signed up to serve, not to disappear. At a memorial corner in Fort Hood, a young soldier left a card that read, "Forgive us. We saw you every day, and we didn't see you at all." From unspeakable pain, from undeniable truth, Vanessa became a symbol, but also a scar. A wound still open, still bleeding, every time another woman in uniform says, "I'm scared, and no one believes me." A week after Vanessa's remains were found, people began to realize something even more horrifying than her death. The truth had been hidden, or worse, ignored, by an entire system. Suddenly, people who had worked with her began appearing on the news, saying things they had known all along. One soldier said Vanessa had told him she felt like she was being followed, but he was too afraid to step in. Another remembered how she often looked anxious, constantly checked her phone, always locked her door, even when stepping out for just a minute. Piece by piece, the memories were gathered. Not to identify a killer, but to confront a truth. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one said anything. Military officials released an internal investigation report. Fort Hood fostered a culture of fear, a place where lower voices were silenced by higher ranks. The reporting system was broken. Victims of harassment stayed quiet, afraid of retaliation. Witnesses chose silence, thinking, "It's not my business." In one leaked recording, an officer is heard saying, "I knew what happened to Guillén, but my superiors told me not to dig. So no one dug, no one asked, no one looked." The truth was no longer about one man killing one woman. It was about a system killing someone through indifference. Across communities, the question echoed. If Vanessa had been a white woman, a colonel's daughter, would she have disappeared like that? No one answered. But everyone understood. A wave of shattered trust swept through the country. Veterans spoke out. Families of other victims began coming forward, carrying photos of daughters, sisters, nieces. Women who had gone missing, been assaulted, reported it, and were then transferred, discharged quietly, or erased. Stories buried in files were dragged into the light. It wasn't just Vanessa anymore. She was the visible tip of an iceberg the military had been trying to sink for years. People no longer believed press conferences. They wanted action, not apologies, not posthumous medals. They wanted laws rewritten. They wanted soldiers to have safe places to speak up. They wanted silence to be held accountable. In Houston, thousands gathered with candles in hand, chanting her name. Vanessa, Vanessa, Vanessa. Her name was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been left in the dark. They called it the I Am Vanessa Guillén Act, a bill named after someone who had died, someone who tried to speak and was ignored. It wasn't a coincidence that this law was written in tears. Behind every line were stories never told, wounds never healed, and a mother who never stopped waiting for her daughter to walk back through the door. Gloria Guillén, the woman who once stood silently at the gates of Fort Hood in 100-degree heat, now stood before the United States Congress, not to cry, but to speak. With slow, tear-filled English, she told of the last night she heard her daughter's voice, of the calls where Vanessa would ask, "Mom, did you eat yet?" And of the 71 days of silence, when she didn't know if her daughter was alive or already gone. Alongside attorneys, advocates, and over 1 million signatures, the Guillén family made a simple demand: create an independent system to investigate harassment and sexual assault in the military. No more letting commanders handle reports, especially when the commanders themselves might be the ones being reported. No more forcing victims to speak to people who outranked them, people who could erase files, bury truth, or worse, threaten them into silence. It wasn't an easy battle. Many lawmakers supported the bill, but others pushed back. Some argued the military should handle things internally, that outsiders shouldn't interfere. But the Guillén family never backed down. They traveled state by state, met with every representative, told their story over and over, until no one could say, "I didn't know." Finally, in December 2021, the I Am Vanessa Guillén Act was signed into law as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. It transferred sexual assault investigations to independent agencies. It forced the system to open its doors. And it placed a name into history, not just as a victim, but as the reason for change. But when the bill was signed, Vanessa's mother didn't smile. She simply bowed her head, placed her hand over her heart, and whispered, "Mija, I did it, but I still wish you'd come home." Because no law can bring her back. No sentence can erase what she endured. Justice, though delayed, is still justice. But for the Guillén family, it would always be incomplete. Aaron Robinson was dead. Cecily Aguilar was in custody. The law had passed, and Vanessa Guillén had been laid to rest in a flag-draped casket. On paper, it looked like closure, but in the hearts of many, especially those who followed her story from the beginning, something still felt wrong. Questions lingered. Why wasn't Robinson placed under tighter watch, especially once he was linked to the case? Who allowed him to walk free, leave the base, and take his own life? Was he really the only one involved? Were there others in uniform who helped hide the truth, erase security footage, delay the investigation, yet were never held accountable? Cecily Aguilar claimed she helped him dismember and dispose of the body, but every detail came from her, the only one left alive. No one to cross-examine, no recorded confession, no hard evidence, aside from the word of someone who once loved him, feared him, and once said, "I didn't think he could do it until I saw the blood." Even after the case, some at Fort Hood said the air in the base remained heavy. No one spoke her name. Some were transferred. Some retired early. But no one was charged for ignoring her warnings, for dismissing her pleas. The system changed, but people didn't. And that left a quiet doubt that never truly faded. The headlines moved on. Her name faded from the front pages. But for her family, and for those who once stood with them outside the gates, the story never ended. Every year, on April 22nd, people visit her grave. They bring flowers, candles, and questions with no answers. They no longer come looking for justice. They come to make sure she's never forgotten. Plastic bracelets stamped with "Justice for Vanessa" still sell online. Some wear them in solidarity. Some wear them as a reminder. But most wear them for themselves. Because somewhere out there, another Vanessa may be afraid, may be silent, may be sending signals. And this time, someone needs to listen. Some stories aren't meant to have an ending, because the ache they leave behind is what keeps us awake. The story of Vanessa Guillén is one of them. She used to run every morning on base, down cracked concrete paths, earbuds in, shirt soaked with sweat, dirt on her shoes. Once, she joked to a friend, "Every day feels the same," but no one could have known. One day, that routine would be the only thing people remembered her by. Vanessa didn't die from a single bullet. She died because no one listened. She died in a system where whistleblowers are doubted, and the powerful are protected by silence. But the deepest pain wasn't just that she was killed. It was that we'd gotten used to deaths like hers. Shock for a few days, a week of outrage, then silence. And her name, Vanessa Guillén, slowly slipped down the headlines, pushed aside by newer names, newer stories, newer hashtags. But to the mother who waited for hours outside the base gates, to the sister who handed out flyers across the state, to the thousands of women who've lived through nights they couldn't speak about, Vanessa never disappeared. She's still here, in the smiling photo on the altar, in the law that bears her name, in the eyes of every young woman stepping onto base, carrying both hope and quiet fear, in the whispers passed between soldiers. If something ever happens, don't let them stay silent. No one knows exactly what happened in that armory room that day. There was no confession, no surviving witness, only a brutal, simple truth. A young woman who believed in the uniform was killed by someone who wore it. And unless that system changes, Vanessa will not be the last.